It is in our mutual interest to stabilize India-China ties. We have agreed to work with purpose and urgency to achieve complete disengagement of the troops at the India-China border. Focusing on foreign direct investment, FDI, from China seems promising for boosting India's exports, similar to how East Asian economies did in the past. Welcome to Geopolitics Demystified. I'm your host, S.L. Canton. We bring in perspectives you do not see or hear in the mainstream media. The stunning quotes you heard are from Indian Foreign Minister Jaishankar and India's Chief Economic Advisor. Such ideas have been unthinkable over the last 4 years since the India-China border clash in 2020. In fact, I have been attacked on social media by fellow Indians for suggesting India-China rapprochement. Many people have even tried to get me banned on social media or arrested for such thoughts, believe it or not. So what happened? Why the sudden and seismic shift in India's attitude towards its relations with China? Answer: geopolitics and economy. Before we delve into the details, I would like to share this beautiful quote from Mahatma Gandhi. There is no path to peace. Peace is the path. Well, after 4 years of deteriorating diplomatic environment, there is suddenly hope for the relationship between the world's two most populous nations and neighbors. There is no denying that there are some inherent geopolitical tensions between India and China, like Pakistan, or struggle over spheres of influence in Sri Lanka and Maldives. However, these are modern problems that arose due to the economic rise of both countries. If you look at the last 2,000 years, these two civilizations were friends and trade partners. There was a time when the Chinese traders would bring tea, silk, porcelain, etc., and drop them off in South India. Then the Indian traders would leverage the monsoon winds to carry the Chinese goods to Africa, from where the goods would go to the Roman and Greek empires. Then Chinese philosophers would visit India to exchange ideas. And of course, Buddhism spread from India to China. In fact, Confucianism and Hinduism have a lot in common. At a societal level, Chinese and Indians share many similar values, like importance of families and relatives, parents sacrificing a lot for their kids, truly valuing education, etc. In the US, one would find that immigrant Chinese families and Indian families are often best friends. Thus, imagine what would happen if 3 billion people from two ancient civilizations worked together in harmony to focus on development. That will truly create the Asian century. Going back to 2020, the India-China border conflict resulted in calamitous repercussions in terms of public sentiments, commerce, investments, diplomacy at the highest levels, and people-to-people exchange. So why are we witnessing the sudden shift in the attitude, with India emphasizing progress at the border and even welcoming FDI from China in the new Economic Survey 2024 report? 3 reasons. 1. The geopolitical reality known as the multipolar world. Number 2. Imperialist attitude of the US towards India. And number 3, China's supreme prowess in technology and manufacturing. Multipolar world. As Chinese President Xi Jinping has said, we are living through changes unseen in a century. And as Russian President Putin said, the Western domination of 5 centuries is over. Both are referring to the end of the American century and the rise of a multipolar world. However, human psychology has a proclivity to believe that the past and present are predictors of the future. This is also the reason why people buy stocks when they are up and sell when they are down. Thus, for many years, Indian think tanks and the media bought into the narrative of American exceptionalism and its enduring hegemony. The enormous success of Indian immigrants in the US also contributed to this biased view. Moreover, thanks to the Western media, which influences the Indian media a lot, China is always portrayed as a poor and polluted country, or that Chinese economy is about to collapse. And the US media and politicians spread dozens of racist and ignorant tropes like Chinese cannot innovate and thus they only copy or steal. Chinese products are cheap and low quality. China's political system is totalitarian and thus is inherently bound to fail, and so on. However, anyone who has been to China knows how advanced the country is. Cities like Shanghai, Beijing, and Shenzhen are incomparably better than American cities like New York, Los Angeles, or San Francisco. By the way, I've been to China, and perhaps I'll do a separate podcast on it. But most Americans are still living in their own exceptionalist bubble. When Chinese athletes in the Olympics in Paris defeat the US team to win gold medals in tennis or swimming, the first reaction of many Americans is to suspect that the Chinese must be taking drugs. This, although the US controlled Olympic Committee tests Chinese athletes 3 to 4 times more than they test American or European athletes. This is blatant discrimination and racism. Worse, US athletes test positive for performance boosting drugs 6 times more than the Chinese do. However, all the US propaganda against China, Russia, BRICS, etc. are becoming laughable and impotent. The shifts of economic, technological, and geopolitical powers from the West to the East have been unmistakable. For example, in terms of purchasing power, China is 25% larger than the US. BRICS is bigger than G7, and developing nations have surpassed developed economies. According to the IMF, 2/3 of global economic growth comes from Asia, where the middle class continues to grow rapidly. Meanwhile, the US pretends to be number one by borrowing trillions of dollars and creating financial bubbles. The last nail on the imperialist coffin came when the combined efforts of the US, EU, and NATO failed to crush the Russian economy, isolate President Putin, or defeat the Russian military over the last 2.5 years. Instead, the sanctions backfired, BRICS expanded, and de-dollarization accelerated. Last year, Russia's economy grew and surpassed Germany, which experienced a recession. Russia's industrial ecosystem is so robust that Russians are manufacturing more ammunition than the US and Europe combined. The real wages, adjusted for inflation, is growing rapidly in Russia. And some Western journalists in Moscow are posting photos and videos of a vibrant city with a strong economy. To the chagrin of the US deep state, the global South countries have embraced Russia and Putin further in the last 2 years. From China to India, Vietnam to Saudi Arabia, and Africa to Latin America, everyone is glad to do business with Russia and even visit Putin. like the president-elect of Indonesia just did. These are the multipolar realities that convinced Indian Prime Minister Modi to visit Russia right after his re-election. Modi hugged Putin and called him a friend. Putin awarded Modi with the highest civilian honor, the Order of St. Andrew the Apostle. Indian Foreign Minister Jaishankar said, in geopolitics, there's only one constant, Russia-India friendship. It was also a subtle dig at the US, saying that you guys are not always our friends. And he's right. American imperialism. Indians have realized that being an ally of the US means being a vassal. For example, the entire American establishment was enraged at Modi's visit to Russia. And the US ambassador to India even rudely and hypocritically warned India that there was no such thing as strategic autonomy. However, the US gets to maintain good relations with Pakistan as well as India. In fact, the US gets to stage coups and color revolutions in Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh to install its puppets. Did the US ask India for permissions in these criminal acts? Plus, for more than a year, the US has been waging a hybrid war against India. For example, an American firm attacked India's billionaire Adani and accused him of fraud, resulting in the loss of tens of billions of dollars. Later, the BBC, part of the Anglo-Saxon media empire, tried to rekindle the Hindu-Muslim conflict from 20 years ago to demonize Modi. Later, there was a drama that Canada and other Five Eyes members supporting Sikh separatists, and then endless criticism from Western media and the NGOs about insufficient religious and press freedoms in India. They even have claimed that India is no longer a true democracy. Then Biden canceled his trip to India for the 2024 Republic Day. Worse, it was done at the very last minute. Later, Elon Musk canceled his trip to India, claiming that he's too busy. However, within a couple of weeks, he was making trips to China and Bali. I don't think India will see a Tesla factory anytime soon. Elon is very closely aligned with the US deep state, as was obvious from how he cheered on the failed US coup in Venezuela a few days ago. How Indians woke up. India had been lured by the grand promises of the Americans, who promised to turn India into the next China. This seemed tantalizing, especially after the COVID pandemic broke out. The delusional propaganda from US media, politicians, and even tech executives hyped the concept of decoupling from China, the world's industrial powerhouse. For 2 years, the grandiose buzzwords on everyone's lips were reshoring, friendshoring, and nearshoring. Countries such as India, Vietnam, and Mexico were supposed to be the big winners who would quickly replace China. The naive Washington consensus was that plentiful cheap labor is all it takes to succeed in manufacturing. However, companies like Apple soon found out how difficult it was to scale their production in India. They had to bring in manufacturing experts from China to coach Indian workers. Furthermore, most of the components for iPhones, laptops, etc., had to be imported from China. Thus, India's imports from China keep rising, from $70 billion in 2019 to $100 billion in 2023. China's share of India's imports in critical sectors like chemicals, electronics, and machinery range from 30 to 40%. Explaining what it takes to be successful in manufacturing like China will take thousands of words. It involves infrastructure, transportation, energy, an ecosystem of complementary industries, vertical supply chain integration, urbanization, education, skilled workers, focus on speed and scale, R&D investment, innovation, automation and robots, smart industrial policies, long-term planning, FDI, and much more. There are no shortcuts to attain such comprehensive expertise. Finally, the Indian establishment is starting to extricate itself from the American echo chamber. Economic pragmatism is starting to replace political expediency. The formula for success has already been defined and proven by China and Asian tigers. That is manufacturing, investment, and exports. A couple of weeks ago, this strategy was explicitly highlighted by India's chief economic advisor, Nageshwaran, in the annual economic survey. He said, focusing on FDI from China seems more promising for boosting India's exports, similar to how East Asian economies did in the past. The India China partnership can be a win win opportunity. As China gets richer and older, it needs to outsource some of its labor intensive manufacturing. On the flip side, India has 200 million young people aged 15 through 24, and the wages are much lower than in China. Plus, India has a rapidly growing middle class, which will add another 100 million people by 2030. All those people are potential customers for Chinese companies from the likes of Xiaomi and BYD to Midea and Alibaba. Of course, India must ensure a stable and welcoming environment for Chinese companies and investors. There are plenty of hopeful signs that there will be a reset in India China relations in the coming months. Let's remember that 70 years ago, Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai and Indian Prime Minister Nehru agreed upon the so-called five principles of peaceful existence, or Panchsheel as it is known in India. These include non-aggression, non-interference in internal affairs, mutual respect for sovereignty, equality, and cooperation for mutual benefit. If the two ancient civilizations and neighbors focus on those five principles of coexistence, along with focus on pragmatic issues such as economic development and technological advancement, the coming generations of Chinese and Indians will truly enjoy an Asian century. The end. Thank you. So please like this video and follow the channel, and also follow me on Twitter. The handle is Canthan2030. Thank you, and bye for now.